Alrighty. Welcome everybody to kind of my quick notes on patch 6.2. We will get into the game and show you some stuff in a second, like the Blood Knights and all that stuff in combat. But I just wanted to go over the dev blog really quick, so we'll read through this. It's not super long. There's a magic item rework I'm sure you've heard about on other places. They offered some core changes, so I'm not literally just going to read this verbatim. I am going to get through it kind of broad strokes. Essentially, items got buffed to be more worth your time, so there'll be less junk items that are just a distraction and a nuisance. Fusing them got more consistent and easier to do, but there will also be less items, so you should have less inventory management to do. Okay. There are a bunch of new unique items. They're all very intense and expensive, so I didn't manage to find any of them because I don't have that much time before it goes live, but like big purple spooky items, but they're also fun and silly. New units that you all have heard about: the Hobgoblin Bolt Throwers for the Chaos Dwarves and Blood Knights Sword and Shield for the Vampire Counts. And then here's a big one that I didn't get to show in game because it's hard to like quantitate this, but this is actually huge. Compression. The game's storage size, the amount of space it takes on your computer, is reduced by about a quarter, which is a lot. And then improved loading times when entering battles for up to 40% faster load times. Not all of them are going to be that. It says 5 to 40%, but I did notice them. And I did some comparisons and they weren't worth really showing, but it's like, wow, look, I loaded in kind of slow and then I loaded in decently. That's okay. Improved loading times into campaign, which is nice. So that's cool. So they're doing a bunch of like file rework, so it's less cumbersome of a beast to deal with. Campaign AI changes. I do go over these a little bit in the main menu, so you can see where their checkboxes are, so we'll talk about in that portion of the video. 2D portal update. I don't give a shit about this, but I guess it looks kind of nice. Okay, cool. And then there's various bug fixes. Steeds of Slaanesh, Heartseekers, Hellstriders, all those things have their models changed, so they don't pack together as nicely and do as much damage. I'm sure some people are excited about that for multiplayer. Fixed some crashes. Fixed some other things that were inconsistent. Like, these are all just essentially bug fixes, nothing really worth dealing with. Same with the skills. So skipping down, there are some minor changes here, but if you're a multiplayer fan, this is where you're going to get pretty bummed out. There was a lot of big stuff for campaign, right? The game getting easier to load in and out of, the game size changes is pretty huge. The new items rework is pretty huge. The AI stuff that I'm going to talk about later is actually quite huge, and I'm very excited about it. But in the actual patch notes for multiplayer, here's what you get. It's this list, and a lot of them are bug fixes. The only things that aren't bug fixes is Minotaurs of Khorne get Woodsman and Hide and Forest. So Minotaurs of Khorne get buffed in a way. And then Thundertusk gets a buff. The Ample Peak Greybacks also get Fear and Terror. Apparently they were bugged and they only had Terror, so now the Thundertusk actually applies Fear. So if you thought the Thundertusk was overpowered before, it has Fear now. Melee attack and melee defense for Seekers and Heartseekers reduced by 2. Okay. Armor piercing damage reduced by 4, and base weapon damage increased base weapon damage by 4. So a little less armor piercing on Seekers of Slaanesh as well. And then there's the radius thing we mentioned. We'll see how much that actually changed, but I don't know. I still think Seekers are going to be strong, just maybe not super OP. This really doesn't touch a lot of the things going on in multiplayer right now, so this is not at all a multiplayer focused patch. And another thing that I did notice through checking, none of the items that got updated in campaign got updated in multiplayer. So if you're in campaign and you check out like Scabscrath and you're like, wow, this is really different, and then you load up Vampire Counts in multiplayer, you're getting the old Scabscrath. I don't know if that'll get to live, but that does seem a little odd to me. So, and then they fixed some of the greenskin factions not having WA for some reason. But that's about it. Not a lot on the multiplayer front. A lot of exciting campaign changes that we'll get into, and I do think they're very cool. So it is a cool patch, but not really one for multiplayer at all. With the update, there are a lot of new exciting changes. One of the bigger ones, in my opinion, for making campaigns less redundant and repeatable, is they added 2 new things. So at the bottom of this endgame crisis thing, there's these 2 little extra checkboxes, which it's kind of interesting that they're thrown at the end of that, but there's AI strength and threat assessment. I mean, there's a little explanation there that you can read, but the main point of it is that the AI just is better at not declaring war on you and then AFKing for a long time, or declaring war on you when they have no shot of winning. Like, that's what I was getting out of it. So it should be better AI behavior. So the literal thing, if you're not reading it right now, is when checked, campaign difficulty settings are overridden so that AI factions are always better at assessing threats based on their strength and proximity of rivals, in addition to having generally increased hostility towards unknown factions. The one I'm most excited about, though, is minor faction potential. I like loading in and having a true random game, like not having Malekith win every single time if I'm not involved, or something like that. So minor faction potential, when checked, minor factions make better campaign decisions, increasing their tendency to survive longer and have a bigger impact on the campaign. I think that's pretty huge, because I like my campaigns to be different. Like, you know, you head over to the Southlands, and this time, you know, the Slanesh cult that's down near the south actually ended up winning and taking over most of the southern end of the continent. You're like, wow, that's different and crazy. Not just going down there and Kairos has expanded over the area for the 5th time. So those two extra options are pretty fun. All right, it was hard to get a side-by-side comparison on 2 different patches, so we're using some movie magic and a little bit of jank, as I'm going to move that so it's a little more pleasant on the eyes. All right, left is new. On the new patch that is coming out, right is old. See the giant red old items? See the Windows Media Player instead of the live Total War game? Yeah, old items on the right. So the items in the campaign got a rework. It seems like the better the item, the less of a rework. So the worse items are getting significant buffs to make them more worth taking. Because CA was talking about like item bloat, where you get a bunch of low level crap items that you never want to use and they just fill up your inventory and they're annoying. And then you can like fuse them, but it's all jank. So we're taking a look at some, and to get the easiest consistent results rather than playing 50 turns of a campaign, 50 turns of a different campaign on the new patch and hoping to get some of the same items, I just pulled them up here in the dwarf crafting thing. But all items got a pass, right? So let's take a look at what's optimal here. Ranger's crossbow, 2nd on the left, 1st on the right. In the old version, it just had plus 10% range and plus 15% reload. Now on the new one, it has 15% reload, 10% range, and it has 50 base missile damage. Now, again, not a huge change, but I'm just showing you it's getting pretty significant buffs. Prospector's pickaxe, from 30 armor piercing damage to 80. Slayer's axe, from 3 melee attack and 15 charge bonus to 8 melee attack and 20 charge bonus. All right. Gatekeeper's hammer looks to be the same. So a lot of the blue stuff is going to be the same. As I'm going to advance the Windows Media Player for a second, so it scrolls down. Yeah. All right. Iron Warden's hammer looks to be the same. So yeah, the blue items are mostly going to be the same from what I noticed. Not entirely consistent. Like, it's not like every blue item in the whole game will be exactly the same, but when I was looking through it, it's like all the greens and all the grays had changes. Almost none of the blues did. So get him to switch over the armor. There we go. Now back to the comparison thing. Iron Warden shield, that one got something, whereas we saw the weapons, none of the blues changed at all. This one got missile block chance plus 20% for the Iron Warden's shield. So anyway, like I said, we could go through every item in this dwarf list, and then you'll be like, well, what about other things? And then it's like, well, every item in the whole game, we can't go through everything. Basically, green and gray items got buffs, whereas the blue ones didn't as much. I've beaten this to death. Gray items, biggest buff. Green items, more of a buff, but not as much. Blue, rare buff. Purple, don't see any changes. Okay? Okay. All right, we're going to check out some of the new units given out in patch 6.2. There are 2 of them. Hobgoblin Bolt Thrower and Blood Knights, Sword and Shield. Well, they're just Blood Knights. Now the Blood Knights with lances are the Blood Knights you know and love. So Blood Knight, Sword and Shield, just checking out their stats really quick. Compared to their brethren, they do have a much higher melee defense, higher weapon strength with significant bonus versus infantry, plus 16. And then their Frenzy, of course, gives them a nice, healthy melee attack. So they are pretty tanky in both aspects. Melee defense and then armor-wise. Armor and all that stuff is pretty similar to the Blood Knights. Lances. Why? Hang on. Why is one 65 and the other one 70? Base value. Base value flank secure. Oh, that's interesting. Anyway. Yeah, they also have the Flag of Blood Keep like their brothers. They are just the same except slightly different stat line. But with that significantly higher melee defense, I was just curious about their performance. And it felt like they had really high stats for a bump and grind cavalry. I was like, damn, with 16 bones versus infantry, you have like 62 melee attack when you have Frenzy up. So we're going to do a quick test here. Hex Wraiths for their armor piercing and ethereal status. Blood Knights with lances versus 3 Chaos Warriors and versus 3 Marauders. Now there's going to be some terror, so, you know, it's not like, wow, they routed them 1 second faster. We'll see how that goes, but I am just curious. So on the charge, the regular Blood Knights, the Blood Knights with lances get similar impact damage on these braced infantry. That's nice. And Hex Wraiths do nicely as well. Now the lances are going to suffer from having 12 less melee defense. So against these armor-piercing Chaos Warriors, they actually should take a significant amount of damage. And we can see the Blood Knights both got through those infantry at about the same time. Now there is about a terror route too, but I mean, you can just eyeball look at their health. The Sword and Shield ones, their Marauders at 2,100 HP. The Lance one, their Marauders at 2,500. So clearly the Sword and Shield wasn't just like, the terror is the only reason they got through them. So against light infantry, they both perform quite well. And against heavy infantry, we can see, again, the terror has come in, but at the moment the terror is coming in, we're at 3,600 HP, 5,200. So it's against the heavily armored, higher stat infantry with the melee defense higher than that of their Marauder brethren that the Sword and Shield really come out on top. Otherwise, the melee defense isn't helping them that much compared to the lances yet. You know, they have like 100 more HP. But the ability to just kill someone off nice and quickly, because terror wouldn't even have procced on those great weapons up there yet, right? They're not that low on leadership, as these ones are going to rally briefly, but the Blood Knights have done their damage and pushed them off. Now with the terror, because of the Hex Wraiths, it's not going to be like a perfect test, but it is a bit of an eyeball thing. These Blood Knights Sword and Shield were not even close to dying by the time those guys routed. The Blood Knights with the lances, now their charge bonus is worn off, which they have a higher charge bonus than these guys. But now their charge bonuses wore off. These Chaos Warriors with their great weapons are going to fight back, and they are tearing apart the Blood Knights with the lances. And they do end up actually beating them, except for I think army losses procs, and that's the only reason. Nah, the unit does die. So the sword and board ones have a demonstrably better capacity at bumping and grinding with enemy infantry. 774 compared to the 645. But these guys, you know, they didn't die to do it while the other Blood Knights did. So that's nice. They are a little bit better at the bump and grind. On to a more standard test, though, of what these units will truly be used for. We have 3 Blood Knights with lances, 3 Blood Knights with sword and board, and against Grail Knights, Questing Knights, and Knights of the Realm each. So how do they do without the anti-large? Again, their higher melee defense should mean they take less return damage from these Bretonnian cavalry, but we will see. So they charge in. It's still solid damage. Even without the anti-large, they just have high enough stats that, like the Knights of the Realm, they're still punching through them pretty good as you compare across the pond over here. One Knight of the Realm at about 3,000. This one's at 3,500. So the significant anti-large of the regular Blood Knights, the ones with lances that you are used to, still are going to get through cavalry faster than the sword and board. But the sword and board have high enough stats to do an admirable job. It's not like they shouldn't ever touch cavalry ever. They'll just do fine, you know? So both of the Blood Knights lances have broken through already, and they're chasing their counterparts down, while the Blood Knights with the sword and board beat up the Knights of the Realm. One thing I do want to check, though, is how much value the Knights of the Realm got. 300 for this Knight of the Realm. The other one got 250. Okay, so the lances even didn't let them get as much value. I was curious if there was maybe going to be like, oh, your higher melee defense kept you safer, but no, not versus the Knights of the Realm, so it's not really going to be a thing. Questing Knights also pushed off. So still, even the non-Lance Blood Knights can beat Questing Knights if they get the charge on them. Of course, I acknowledge these guys were sitting still because I'm in sandbox mode, for sure. But I don't know if countercharging would have changed the result that much, considering how far ahead this Blood Knight is. Now, the real change is going to come with the Grail Knights. We can see the Blood Knight Sword and Board is doing about the same as the Lances, HP-wise, but the damage value is pretty different against the Grail Knights. The Grail Knights over here have 3,000, while the Lances have only 1,200. So if you're going to face elite cavalry, you should keep your Blood Knight Sword and Board away from that if possible, because your Lances can actually win. So this is a short one. There's not even really a demonstration because they're literally the same unit, but the Goblin Bolt Throwers that were introduced with Omens of Destruction just literally are the Hobgoblin Bolt Throwers. You can look, they even have the same model. The only difference is you have a Hobgoblin crew, and the difference in stats is just the Hobgoblin crew difference. 10 more armor, malign authority, and a higher base leadership than Goblin Bolt Throwers, with a higher melee weapon strength, not a missile weapon strength. This is literally the exact same unit as the Goblin Bolt Thrower. Doesn't need a demonstration, just, you know, copy paste. The models are even the same, and I have seen some other creators talking about that. I don't know if that's just like an early build thing and they'll be updated before the release or whatever, but it's literally the same unit, so it's not new to the game. It's just now Chaos Dwarves have access to it.
Subscribe, yes, yes.